Welcome to the Pinal County Crime Podcast, The Trial of Terrance Santistevan. My name is Jodie Newell. I'm a reporter with the Casa Grande Dispatch, and joining me is my fellow reporter from the Casa Grande Dispatch, Noah Cullen. How you going, Noah?
We're good. How are you, Jodie?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I'm sort of really pleased we got our first episode under the belt, and the feedback's been pretty decent. I've sort of told people, it was a bit rough, and we sort of, we're doing it on the fly, but we got it out, and that's the main thing. As you Americans say, you get it done and all that. And no, we've had some really, really good feedback, and I'm really sort of surprised that who's listening, and no, I think we've had about 400 views, I think, which is pretty cool because normally our videos only get 30, 40, or 100 or something. So it's been good.
Yeah, I just checked before this. Yeah, it's cool to see. We're getting into the podcast space, just like everybody else.
That's it, mate. Yeah. So basically, we're here to talk about an incident regarding a shooting that happened at the Sonoran Apartments on April 24, 2022, and it resulted in the unfortunate deaths of Leslie Cota, who was aged 18, and Danielle Murrieta, who was aged 17, and Terrance Santistevan is facing 2 counts of murder, and the trial is currently underway at the Pinal County Superior Court. And the prosecution is led by Sean Jensvold, and he's assisted by Lauren Deacon. And on the defence side, we have Christopher Lynch and Anne Ellsbury of the Pinal County Public Defender's Office. So, Noah, just before we get into the podcast, I'd just like to make a couple of corrections. Like we said last week, that if we get something wrong or incorrect, we're more than happy to make that correction. I was pronouncing Leslie Cota's mother with that surname, and it's actually Claudia Sanchez. So, Claudia, I'm so sorry that I got your surname incorrect. So, Mrs. Sanchez, Claudia Sanchez, that's how it goes. So that's been corrected. And I'd like to thank Brianna for bringing that to our attention. Brianna sits with Claudia in the courtroom. She's been there every day. She's done a tremendous job, providing support to Mrs. Sanchez. And so thanks so much, Brianna, for, telling us that the surname was actually Sanchez. So that's great. And the other correction we'd like to make is that I said last week that my understanding of Dominic Laos was that he was facing charges in relation to people smuggling. Well, he actually has been charged with people smuggling. And I understand, Noah, he's recently, he was incarcerated, and he's still, I think, on probation, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. He was released December 4th, is what he said, and
Last
then
year, yeah.
according to the Bureau of Prisons records, he's still in their custody until September.
Sure. So they're the 2 corrections that we'd like to just point out. And like I said, if you think that we've said something incorrect, we're more than happy to correct that. So thanks again to the folks who pointed that out. So Noah, in your article for this week, or the end of this week, you described the trial as reaching the halfway mark. Is that sort of a fair description of the trial and where we're at currently?
It seems like it. I guess they said 6 weeks was kind of the duration of the trial, and it could be less than that, or it could be more than that, I suppose. But so just based on kind of what they said at the beginning, with 6 weeks, we're at the end of the 3rd week, and so we're halfway through. And I guess sort of since we're halfway through, I kind of tried to link both sides, try to give sort of their themes that we've sort of heard reoccur.
Do you think there's
those themes kind of being?
Sorry, Matt. No, go on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Quickly, the themes, I guess, at least for the prosecution, it's they've had a lot of witnesses come forward, kind of weighing their testimony against a pretty crucial witness who was Ramon Salinas, who, when he was testifying, they played an interview that he did with Santistevan, when Santistevan was arrested in Texas on April 30th. And then throughout the hour interview, Santistevan kind of relayed his story, his own account of kind of where he was on April 24th, when the day the shooting happened. And so since that, but also sort of before that, the prosecutors sort of brought witnesses forward to sort of plug holes into that story. And there's a number of witnesses who come forward saying certain things that has sort of countered what Santistevan said. That's sort of kind of been the prosecution's theme. And the defense has an extra number of threads. It's casting sort of general doubt on the certainty that it was Santistevan who was the shooter, and mentioning other names like Jose Nunez and Alex Pena, and other names too as other people who may have been there. but also sort of casting doubt on the investigation itself. Um, there's been many detectives and officers from the Casa Grande Police Department who testified, and during each of those cross examinations, the defense has cast doubt on how they conducted their investigation, and namely because Dominic Leos, who is central to the case, um, two family members of his were also involved in law enforcement. His grandfather is deputy chief with the Casa Grande Police Department, and his father, Adrian Leos, is a lieutenant with the Pinal County Sheriff's Office. And so those are sort of main threads that they've continually brought up as potential conflicts of interest. So that's been central to their point of
Sure,
view.
sure. That's been the recurring theme, hasn't it? Oh, like the prosecution are trying to, poke holes as you described, with
Yeah.
Santistevan's alibi, saying that he was, at home playing PlayStation and smoking blunts. I think that's how he described it. And on the
Yep.
defence side, they're trying to cast aspersions on, the connection, the family connection between Dominic Leos and his father and grandfather. And so yeah, it's sort of like a little bit like trench warfare, isn't it? Sort of like a stalemate, I gather. Like they're both sort of set in, how they're sort of approaching this, and it's sort of like settled in, hasn't it? That's the sort of feeling I get with this trial. Like they've sort of, they've taken this stance, and well, that's what we saw this week anyway.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what which when I went to go write this latest story, it's kind of what struck me too, is that it felt like both sides have sort of solidified their themes and their perspectives. And so I think within the next coming 3 weeks, I think we'll see those entrenched sort of themes kind of carry out and play out more so. But I think we kind of are aware at this point pretty much where each side is standing and what they're going to say.
Yes, yeah, yep. I guess for you, what would be the highlight of this week in terms of witnesses? I mean, obviously, Dominic Laos was the star witness, wasn't he? I use that word
Yeah.
loosely. Yeah, he was the sort of key witness, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of highlights, I think it would have to be Dominic Lewis. I mean, he is just central to the whole case and to the shooting. And so here, on the stand, especially the cross examination of Leos was kind of riveting to see, and it was fascinating. Yeah. So I think he's probably the highlight this week.
Yeah, we will be going to a couple of audio grabs of that cross examination by both the prosecution and the defence. And yeah, I think Christopher Lynch was at his pugnacious best when it came to cross-examining Laos. What do you think of Lynch's efforts with Laos this week, Noah?
Yeah. I mean, just like with everybody else, I mean, Lynch is super detailed, and if he catches you with one something that's off in your testimony, he's gonna hit
He's
you
on
on it,
you.
and he does
Yeah,
that with everybody. Yeah. So yeah, no layup of no exception.
yeah, and he walks up to the bench and kind of leans on it. It's a bit like the movies, isn't it? Like it's like there's been so many films, with that sort of lawyer, sort of in the courtroom, and he's very much a dramatic defender, isn't he?
Yeah. No, he's super animated, and yeah, you can hear the passion. So
Mm,
yeah, it's
mm.
it's cool to see.
So I asked you, in one of the interviews, you indicated to the police that you didn't have a gun on the day of the shooting, but you did own a gun, right? And your answer was, I'm not sure.
Like I said, possibly.
Take a look. 35, number 1, number 5.
I didn't want to self-incriminate myself.
So you might have owned a gun on the day of the murders, right?
I didn't own a gun on the day of the shooting.
You did?
I did not.
Okay. It says you weren't sure though, right?
I just said I did not have one on the shooting.
But you did own a gun, right? Answer, I'm not sure.
I didn't want to self-incriminate myself.
Okay.
But it is my constitutional right to own a gun.
So you lied.
Not necessarily.
Well, you didn't say, I want to take the 5th. You said you weren't sure, right?
I was going through a historical event.
Didn't ask you that.
Well,
I asked you what you said.
I'm telling you, I wasn't sure.
I'm not sure, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And like we said last week, Jensvold always, plays his cards close to his chest, and He's sort of the more methodical, emotionless, if I can say that. He's very methodical in the way he presents his cross-examination.
He's very matter of fact and straightforward.
All right. Dominic, and your response is, what's up? WASSUP, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then does Terrance respond to you on the same day at 19:21:20, so about 6 seconds after your response?
Yes, sir.
What does he say?
How long? Question mark. I'm not waiting all day, cut.
CUH, is that cuh?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Like crip. Like cousin. Crip.
All right, and I'm not going to go through all of these right now, but then you respond to him a few minutes after that. Is that right, on the same day?
Yes, sir.
You say, I'm waiting RN. Does that mean right now?
Yes.
And then PA, what does that mean?
Like, I don't know how to explain that, but it's just like pot.
Okay. Is there any other word that other people might use that give us an idea as to what that means?
It just means like, I guess like, I don't even know how to explain that.
Like,
But
if someone were to use bro, would that be
yeah, that's like, yeah, the same meaning.
like an older person's version of that?
Yes.
Just for our listeners who don't know who Dominic Laos is, he was having a romantic relationship with Leslie Cota, and they both lived at the Sonoran Apartments, and they actually shared that house with Kyle Curtis and Tyler. Noah, can you help me out here?
Tyler Shepard.
Tyler Shepard, thank you so much. Had a bit of a brain fade there. And they shared
A lot of names.
Yeah, it is a lot of names to remember, mate. Thank you. So they were sharing a place at the Sonoran Apartments. It was, I think, in the upper levels of the Sonoran. And Dominic, they were going out to get something to eat at about 8:30ish, and Dominic and his friends were still sort of inside the apartment, is my understanding, or a couple were outside at the above deck. And walking down to start up the car was Leslie and Danny. And it's alleged that Terrance Santistevan came by and fired off, I think, about 20 rounds. And unfortunately, those two girls lost their lives. And Laos was the first one to sort of run down. My understanding is to run down and see those girls. And he actually said during his testimony, Noah, that, one of the girls, his girlfriend died in his arms, or along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. Yeah, I mean, throughout his testimony, which completely understandably, he said that he was his memory was sort of jogged because during that time, he had been through such a traumatic event. And so, yeah, he did say that. He said he just had two girls die in his arms. And so his memory isn't super focused or clear all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fair to say that, police officers have described his moods as being like a roller coaster and hysterical. And I guess when Officer Blum arrived at the scene, we saw that camera footage last week, and he's just hysterical, and he's a total wreck. When you listen to the audio, but then that's a recurring theme with Laos in the early days after the event, Noah, like the infamous traffic stop at Cottonwood, where Jose Nunez and Dominic were pulled over, because that's been questioned by the defence too, with regards to the two getting together when police practice is to have the witnesses separated. And I can sort of understand. They were split. I think I get the impression during that evidence for Laos at that stop, Noah, that they were split up. And I think the police officers were exercising discretion in terms of compassion, because he was genuinely upset, and I think, and they did respond in a compassionate manner to Laos at the scene.
Yeah, I think Laos or someone said that Jose was sort of kind of prodding him to tell the police, you should tell them this, to tell them this. Yeah, even though some and there are other officers, some of them interviewed them separately, and then there was also testimony that they were interviewed together. So both of those things happened. But yeah, even when they were interviewed together, I think Leos and an officer who interviewed them sort of was saying that Jose Nunez was sort of helping him along and trying to get him to say certain things.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, the word traumatized comes to mind when it comes to Laos. I mean,
Yeah.
to see those horrific scenes, it would have been a traumatic event, and so I think I think that should be taken into account. As a human being reacting to an extremely awful scenario. Yeah. Um, the other thing I noticed about Laos's testimony this week, Noah, was he used the word historic a lot of times. He used the word historical event. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think he said it once, and then Lynch sort of grabbed onto the word. But I guess I just took it to mean to be synonymous to traumatic. I don't know that he meant anything different. It just seemed to be like a very memorable event that happened in his past that has shaped
Mm.
everything since that. And so historical isn't necessarily, it just meant traumatic to me.
Mm. What were some of the key things that jumped out to you with regards to his testimony? Well, I mean, apart from the Cottonwood Lane pullover the day after the incident, what were some of the key takeaways for you with Dominic's testimony during the week?
Yeah, there were a couple things. Definitely one of the main things was it was revealed a little bit more just how, maybe we haven't mentioned so far in this episode, but central to this case is Dominic Leos's involvement and Santistevan's and Nunez's, their involvement together in a human smuggling operation. And so during his testimony, we kind of get a deeper look into just how far he kind of made it up the ranks. And in the cartel, he even said that he went to Mexico a few times. That's what he said. When questioned about him actually meeting some sort of cartel chief, I believe that was actually how that was the term. So how high up in the ranks is this cartel chief? I don't know, but he did meet somebody that was, higher up in the rank. And so that was revealing. I don't know that I wasn't aware of that before this.
And the other thing I'd like to raise too, because the defence is saying, well, because his father is a police officer and his grandfather is a deputy chief, that that somehow they're getting in the way. Well, I mean, Leos actually said along the lines of, well, my family was the folks in Mexico and not the family, his blood family. I found that to be a pretty, a pretty resolute kind of statement about his, family status. I mean, it was pretty brutal. Noah?
Yeah, he used the word estranged to
Yeah.
describe his relationship with his family, and so, yeah, it was estranged from his family.
Mm, mm. At that time, yeah, I don't know what the current scenario is, but yeah, at that time, he basically said, they were my family and not, my blood family. So that was quite a revelation hearing him say that. Yeah. Um, the people smuggling issue, it's jumping out everywhere now, and not just from Dominic Laos, but we had testimony this week too of Jordan Rasky. Do you want to talk a little bit about her and her involvement in this case, or connection with the case, I should say?
Yeah, yeah. I guess the human smuggling aspect of her isn't necessarily actually biggest connection. She's connected mainly in the case because a gun of hers that she owned was confiscated by Border Patrol, and that gun was linked to the scene on April 24th. And so we've talked about that gun before. We've talked about the casings that were linked to the gun. And then so on June 6th was the date that Border Patrol found her, the car that she was in, and the gun. And so through a national database called NIBIN, they were able to match the gun to the scene. And so that's where Jordan Rasky comes into play. Although Jordan Rasky was actually involved in a human smuggling operation too. And I believe on the stand, she said that when she was arrested on June 6th, that was the first time that she had ever attempted to do it. So I guess it was a super recent involvement, but the first time she ever attempted it, she was arrested, and the gun that she owned. And we can talk a little bit about, she was on the stand, sort of the prosecution was trying to draw a line between how the gun got into her possession and whose hands did it pass along to get to her from the shooter on April 24th. That was the central thread to the case. And so,
Mhm.
but yeah, that was the gun that she had. That's the most important part of her
Indeed, yeah. I
conviction.
mean, yeah, it was a Glock 19 model pistol, Glock pistol, and also I remember they got some magazines as well too. Noah, I think there was a standard clip, and then there was a larger clip as well too that they found inside the car of Jordan Rasky. I think it was a blue Subaru. I think, yeah. And
That
like you
sounds
say,
right.
yeah, and like you say, she drove first attempt. She drove to the border, and the border patrol, you know, arrested her and searched the car, and obviously they did a NIBIN connection. I've actually seen a NIBIN machine, Noah, the Casa Grande police. So I did a story on them several weeks ago, and was shown, they've actually got a machine where they can, match up bullets and shell casings and the like. And they're connected to a national database, and it cuts out the need for them to actually drive up the road to Phoenix or the DPS or whatever. They've actually got NIBIN in Pinal County, so that's a real boon for the police to have that tool when it comes to
Yeah.
solving crimes. And so, uh, the thing that's jumping out with this case, Noah, is that it's so important to have, NIBIN and, to have that database to help, solve crimes. And obviously with the Jordan Rasky narrative, it really did play a key role in connecting that gun that, that was associated with the events of April 24, 2022.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess also on her, when she was being questioned, um, when the prosecution was trying to determine the threat of people that, the gun may have passed along, I think she mentioned that when she was arrested, she was pulled over with a man, if I'm remembering the name correctly, it was, Zachary, Edsel, I believe, if I'm saying,
That
hopefully I'm
sounds right.
saying that right.
Yeah,
That
that
is,
sounds pretty right.
that's
Yeah.
who she was arrested with. And she bought the gun from him. But then when she was testifying, the prosecution brought up some photos that they had taken from her phone. And there were some photos with her and a bunch of other people. And they were able to spot another man named Clay Moss. They asked her about him, and she said she didn't remember. And she said that a lot. And her reasoning for that was during the time in 2022, she said that she was taking a lot of psychedelic drugs, and so that was affecting her memory. And so that was the reason that she gave for why she couldn't remember a lot of things, including that. But she was also asked that whether she had a relationship with the man named Clay Moss. She didn't remember, but Clay Moss, it wasn't necessarily pressed so much, but Yensville did ask whether she knew that Clay Moss had a connection to Laos. And she didn't know, but so that question was sort of the link, I suppose, between how the gun may have somehow crossed paths or gotten into her possession.
Yeah. And she did say she was consuming psychedelics and marijuana, and it did, as she said, it impaired her memory. And she would say many times, "I can't recall" or "I can't remember." But yeah, it was just an interesting snapshot too of, you know, the people, especially the young people, that are involved in, people smuggling. They're aged, well, at the time they were aged about 18 or whatever. Noah, they were, very young teenagers. Getting involved in some pretty heavy stuff. I mean, Dominic was like you said before, Noah. He was going over the border and mixing with some pretty heavy types.
I think we asked you this a while back, but I'll ask you again. Prior to this June 6th of 2022, had you ever heard the name Terrance Santistevan?
No.
Ever heard the name Dominic Leos?
No.
Ever heard the name Jose Nunez?
No.
Ever heard the name Burgundy Whitman?
No.
Elizo?
No.
Gael Munoz? Tyler Shepard?
Nope.
Kyle Curtis?
No.
Danielle Murrieta?
No.
Or Leslie Cota?
No.
You never heard any of those names?
Nope.
You didn't when did you first find out about the fact that the gun that you had been carrying might be linked to this case?
During my incarceration.
I think we've talked about this a little bit, but yeah, just the social media sort of aspects of all of this. I mean, everybody that we're dealing with, they're all young and obviously communicate via social media, and just the ease of access that they're able to have with each other, but also somehow with, how they're able to come into contact with the cartel. I don't know, but just the ease of access with that, you can buy weapons, online or via
You can buy
social media. And
drugs.
so that,
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah. So I think just the social media, you can't overstate um, how important social media sort of is to the case, but also just in sort of trying to imagine kind of how all this works. It's all
Yes.
connected. This
Yeah.
is how sort of what connects everybody. And
That's right, Noah. Yeah, I think we were talking about that this week. You know, the key part of social media is that platforms like Instagram and Snapchat and WhatsApp. A lot of the evidence that we've heard, particularly from Santistevan's angle, is he had an Instagram account. Laos had an Instagram account. Nunez had an Instagram account. Several players in this story had Instagram accounts. And the thing that sort of struck me too was that, despite the horror of that event, they were basically, flaming each other like seconds after. Well, not minutes or hours, but seconds. That's the thing that sort of jumped out at me when it came to, some of the communication between some of the key participants in this trial.
yeah, I think Leos even posted after the shooting. I believe Leos even posted a photo of Santistevan. I forget whether it was Snapchat or Instagram, but saying like you're next or something. So it's just a central way that, I guess, obviously just a central way that you're communicating and expressing something that's so deep after something like that would happen.
Yeah, I do remember at the time, Noah, that I remember seeing that photo. I remember it was being passed around Facebook, and yeah, you sort of, people were alleging that it was Santistevan at the time, and and it was only a couple of hours later, that was happening, and I guess the intriguing thing about this too is that you're sort of learning about how law, law authorities, law enforcement authorities have what they've got to do to get that material from places like Meta, who own Instagram and Facebook and the like. And it's interesting hearing how the prosecution talks about, or police officers talk about how they had to, obtain a warrant to get a hold of that information. And it was just interesting to sort of learn about that as well, too, Noah.
Yeah, I was gonna say kind of almost the same thing, that like I said, there's sort of two sides of it. Like, the social media provides such an ease of access for all young people to engage in all of these things that they're being able to engage in. So the ease of access is sort of there for them, but social media also means that all of their communication and everything they're doing is being documented on these platforms, and law enforcement is using that. They're using that to even make fake accounts. I forget. I think it was, I don't want to say the wrong name, but a detective, made a fake Snapchat account and followed Dominic's account and was able to sort of monitor him that way. And there's multiple accounts of that, but just like I said, yeah, just sort of twofold, I guess, that social media is used by all of these young people to sort of the ease of access for all of these things, but then it's also sort of used, because of that, it's used by law enforcement to sort of crack down all of this communication that's been documented.
Sure. And Lynch actually questioned the bona fides of users. I mean, last week we saw a video of Santistevan, allegedly at Santistevan on an Instagram account, brandishing what looked like to be a Glock pistol. And I think Jeff Moberg spoke, said it looked, he couldn't rule out that it wasn't, a Glock
Yeah.
19, but Lynch, in his, sort of defense of that video, said that, how do you know it was Terrance that posted that video? How do you know it was actually Terrance that runs the social media account? I think that's a fair question,
Yeah. Yeah.
even though,
Yeah. It just
the
sort of goes,
circumstances. Yeah, sorry.
even though, yeah, I guess, like maybe we were going to say, even though it was, Terrence's account, doesn't mean that it was him. But yeah, it just sort of goes back to the detailed questioning, and that you can't, yeah, Glitch is going to catch you on what you can prove and what you can't prove. And you can't prove that who it was that posted that. You didn't see it, Sam Stevens' face. And so,
Yeah, it could have been anybody. Like, you just, yeah, The thing I'm learning fast about covering this trial, Noah, is you've got to have the facts, don't you? It's about the facts, and you've got to. I mean, the prosecution has to prove that beyond reasonable doubt that these
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
happened. Yeah, yep. Could we talk about Reginald Ross? Moving across to another form of technology, PlayStation 4, and Reginald Ross is a computer forensic agent, and his testimony was heard, I think, yesterday, or I think it was, or the other day. And it was
I
interesting
believe it was
hearing,
yesterday.
yeah, yesterday. Yeah, I mean, yesterday feels like a million months away, doesn't it? No, this trial
Yeah, I
was,
know. I know. I'm not
you
even
know,
sure.
because you're like focused on this one thing, and then, then someone else comes along and you forget about that. And then, it's just the way that this thing's rolling. But yeah, Reginald Ross, a computer forensic agent, he spoke about a PlayStation that they'd obtained from the possession of Terrance Santistevan. Terrance Santistevan, in that prison interview with Detective Salinas, Santistevan alleges or makes the claim that his alibi was that he was actually at home smoking blunts and playing PlayStation. So Reginald Ross was able to examine the PlayStation that was that was Santistevan's, and he basically described it as being a very complex process of trying to access data from the hard drive of the PlayStation. It was about, I guess, corporate ownership, because Sony doesn't want people to, break into their machines and, get all this data so that people could possibly, copyright or, make copies of their games now. So that was interesting to hear about the
Yeah.
difficulties, law enforcement has. I mean, computer forensic agent, he was no slouch. I mean, this bloke was 100% a geek, and he described the difficulties of, of trying to access that data from the PlayStation.
Yeah. Yeah. He took a lot of time to really explain, pretty in depth, like kind of his process and all, but also the limitations of trying to extract data from a game system like this, and why it's so different from just regular computer. Even though he did say that the PS4 is basically a computer, but given the limitations that you just said about copyright and sort of the business motives of um, game system companies, there's a lot of restrictions on what law enforcement can do. But that isn't to say that they can do nothing. He said that basically his process was, and I wouldn't be able to say in the way that he did, because he was so detailed in his process and his knowledge of the computers. But basically, he was able to take out the hard drive, and he makes a copy of the hard drive just so he's not tampering with the actual evidence. But he makes a
A
complete
clone.
copy
Well,
of the hard drive.
he called it a clone, I think, Noah. Is that correct?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, but he makes an exact clone of the hard drive, and then through that, he has to look at it through the display of the PlayStation. So whatever he can see from like the home screen or whatever on the PlayStation, sort of that's the information that's available to him. That's sort of it. But from that, he's able to say some things. And I mean, the most important thing that he was able to say was that there were two PlayStations. On both of them, he was explaining that when you open a game, it sort of timestamps. It updates the timestamp from when the game was opened, and so you can tell when it was played. It also mentions like certain achievements or trophies that you
Like
may
trophies, yeah,
obtain
yeah.
in certain games. That's also timestamped, and so you can see that. But when you open a game, it's timestamped, and he said that from both PlayStations, there was no timestamped on April 24th, which was the day that Santistevan said that he had been playing. So it's just another sort of slice at the story that he gave on April 30th.
It sort of does poke a hole in Santistevan's alibi, doesn't it? I mean, it literally pokes a hole in his narrative, saying that he was at home, playing PlayStation when I think it was 2 days after it hadn't been used or something. Is that right, Noah? Something along those
That
lines?
sounds right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds right. And then the second one, I think what he said about it was that it wasn't opened or no games was played on the 24th. And the information that he was able to get was all prior to the 24th. One of them, I think, was 2 years after, like you said, and then the other one was prior to the 24th. I hope I'm having that right.
Yeah, I just remember that was a couple of but it just sort of didn't match up with what Santistevan was saying, that he was on that
Yeah.
date he was playing, so it sort of contradicted his statement.
I wanted to talk through what date ranges, I guess, did you find were the last updated dates for the different applications on the PlayStation?
Yeah, so of all the applications on the PlayStation 4, I believe it was Call of Duty Modern Warfare had been updated. And again, this is past the date of, so I didn't find any activity in notifications, trophies, nothing on the date of April 24th. But what I did find is that 4 applications had been updated after 4 of 2024. And those were Call of Duty Modern Warfare, which I believe was the 28th, and then Fortnite, the game Fortnite had been updated.
Noah, during this week we had a ballistics expert. I guess he described himself as a forensic scientist, Michael Hay. He charged $400 an hour for his services, so that's pretty handy money, Noah, to get that kind of money for his job. And basically, he discussed the trajectories of the projectiles and bullets that were shot off on that night. What was your sort of overall impression of Haig's testimony?
Yeah, I guess he sort of served as the crime scene reconstructionist. Even though he wasn't there, he took earlier interviews and used some photos and kind of what he was told by other people, and he sort of was able to reconstruct everything about the shots, and so the direction and where they hit the car. You also, on cross-examination, he was questioned a little bit about the assumptions that he made. Like, I guess one of them being the inflation of the tires, not so the height of the car. And another one being, and I guess in an earlier interview, Leos mentioned that you couldn't open the driver's side back door of his car because of the pull, and so that bit of his interview kind of helped position the car. So that's just an example of sort of how he was using previous interviews to try and reconstruct as accurately as he could, kind of where everything kind of was placed and where the shots hit and the direction, and so just reconstructing the scene is kind of his role.
He described the trajectories and the holes and everything as a snapshot of time. That's basically what he he described the trajectories as such. I think there was around 21 holes on the vehicle. And he sort of spoke about pseudo shippling, I think, or something along those. He had specific. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Pseudo stippling. Yeah.
Pseudo stippling. Yeah. Thank you, Noah. Thank you. Yeah. He used those sort of terms to describe there's certain types of bullet holes, and he spoke very pedantically about the types of holes, that there's different holes. And the other thing that I found interesting was that, because I think very, very early in the trial, Lynch said that the car had been left out in the sun or something, or it had been out in the open, and and I think Lynch questioned Haig about that, and Haig sort of said that it didn't make much difference, like that he still could get data from those bullet holes and trajectories.
Yeah, I guess he was questioning on sort of the door thing, and then the height of the car. But yeah, I guess Lynch is maybe just generally questioning the assumptions that he's making when he does these reconstructions. But I think it was said that the height of the car it wouldn't make too much of a difference. I guess.
Yeah. I guess questioning the integrity of the evidence, with weather and things like that. Like I think he mentioned it had been in the open or something along those lines. But anyhow, and the other thing that you mentioned about the car not being, like, Laos tried to get the door open and the door. This is on the left-hand side of the vehicle. Am I correct, Noah?
Yep.
And that's where and that's where all the projectile holes are. And I did a rough sketch, and if you look at this, you'll see it's a terrible. I mean, I'm not Picasso. I'm a terrible artist, but it sort of gives you an idea of sort of the patterns of the projectiles, and you know, they tended to stay low, Noah. That's the thing I've noticed, with the the holes in the car, that they weren't sort of above in the windows. There was a couple of shots in the windscreen, but they were mostly low and sort of at the on the door.
Yeah. I remember, I guess this reminds me of when the medical examiners spoke. Um, they, they, they could tell that there's a big difference between, um, bullet wounds that, didn't have any sort of obstruction when the projectile is traveling. And so I guess it matches up with the reconstruction that the bullets went through the windows or the side of the car.
Yeah.
And that the medical examiners could tell that it was the bullets were obstructing.
Yeah,
So
and they were saying that girls had abrasions, like from the material, because I think Haig sort of touched on that when a bullet travels along, that it actually sort of transport other matter with it as well too. And, when it sort of strikes, that matter actually strikes the body and leaves sort of like sort of, I don't know, sort of marks, like a little bit of a rash or something, like, because I know the medical examiners touched on that. So, and it sort of ties in with that sort of lower, sort of positioning of the projectiles. But it was a pretty thorough analysis from Haig, and again, it all occurred on the left-hand side of the vehicle. The majority of the shots. There was even a mark on the car that looked like a bullet hole or a bump of a bullet or a projectile. No, but it wasn't a bullet. It was he couldn't say whether or not it was. He just said it wasn't. It was damaged, but it wasn't due to a projectile.
Yeah. Yeah, you could be super precise based on the damage.
And when you looked at that pinch paint, you don't know whether that paint had just come off of the vehicle from the time of the shooting, which is April 24 of 2022, or that's the way that it was at the time of the shooting. Would you agree?
No.
Okay, so the passage of time doesn't affect paint in an impact?
I think it would be broad strokes to say it doesn't affect paint. However, because I have comparison of images taken at the time of the shooting to the images that I took in my personal examination of it, I can certainly cross-compare that. But I examine lots of vehicles that have rust around impact sites, because once the paint's gone, there's, depending on the environment, the rust sets in very quickly. But the characteristics I described, for example, the pinch point, that's something that remains when that bullet creates the impact site and doesn't say come off and come back on. It's actually a defined area at the impact site that was there at the time, and we can verify that by pictures from the crime scene, but also is something that is, you'd have to get in there and actually work on it to actually remove it.
Okay, the next witness I'd like to sort of talk about, it sort of ended off the Friday afternoon, Noah, and it was, I call it a paper sparring bout between Sergeant Brian Martinez of the Casa Grande Police Department and Christopher Lynch. It was a pretty interesting exchange of questions and answers, Noah.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't see all of Brian Martinez's testimony, but yeah, he was both Lynch and Ham were just both super tough in their own way. And so having them sort of go at it was interesting, and sort of brought up a lot of similar themes that Lynch has brought up before.
Assigned tasks. Why are you doing this? Why didn't you do this? And how do you do this? And Sergeant Martinez, gave as good as and Lynch, gave it back too. So it was a sparring contest. They just, they were both, like you say, very tough. And Martinez never batted an eyelid though. He just kept a very, poker face, and was really quite circumspect. He wasn't rattled at all. He was cool as a cucumber.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there was, because like you said, there were critiques on, and like we've heard before, just critique on how things are being followed up upon, and sort of trying to analyze the sort of inner workings of a police department and how tasks are of a case, and how tasks are sort of divvied out, and who's supervisor and who's following up on this thing, and so asking all these questions that
The thing we should state about Sergeant Martinez, he was actually present. He actually was part of the interview of Terrance Santistevan when he was incarcerated in Texas, and so he sort of, he knows this case very well, and he was there when they got Santistevan in Texas. Do you care to sort of comment about that from his involvement from that angle, Noah?
Yeah, I guess he was involved. So he was there in Texas, and sat in on the interview when Detective Salinas interviewed Santistevan. So that was that crucial interview where Santistevan relays his story. So Martinez was there. Martinez was also involved in interviews of many others, including Dominic Leos and Jose Nunez. But also just members of each of members of their families too. I mean, he was involved in. I guess we've heard from testimony from a lot of detectives who with varying sort of roles. Some of them with lasting roles throughout the case and following up on many different topics. And then other detectives or officers who just sort of had minimal roles. Like some officers sort of say that they responded to the scene and they sort of secured a certain section of the scene, and that was they maybe spoke to somebody and then was like a witness and relayed what was said to them, and that was sort of all of their involvement. So there's just varying degrees of involvement that each police officer and detective has in the case. Martinez has pretty expansive involvement, as he said.
Yes, yeah, and again, it comes down to those tasks assigned, like we touched on last week, Noah. That it and Martinez actually said that for the 2 weeks, after the incident on April 24, 2022, it was the term all hands on deck. I know Martinez didn't use that, but the term all hands on deck has been bandied about by a number of CGPD officers, and why shouldn't it be all hands on deck? I mean, this is a big case, and it involves the death of 2 girls, and I sort of I don't understand. The police did a pretty decent job because like they said, they had all hands on deck, and it was a very fluid situation as well too, and crime doesn't stop, like we said last week. It doesn't stop because there's because of one crime, it keeps going, and so they've got to do their job as well too. They've got to keep the city safe and keep us safe. So it's not like you've got to just drop everything and stop. And they're not doing it purposefully. It's just a fact of it's the way it goes, Noah.
Yeah. I think he said like we did nothing else for the past 2 weeks,
Yeah,
talking
2
about
weeks.
the 2 weeks after the shooting. Not to say that there weren't other things that the police department needed to be doing, of course, crimes and stuff, because one incident happens. But like I said, I think he's just sort of emphasizing how important this incident was, and how involved he and others just kind of how crazy busy they were, and how chaotic it had been, must have been for everybody during those 2 weeks.
And a number of bosses, I think they even had, said, well, things could have been done better. And, and of course, I mean, it's just like this podcast. I mean, we're trying to do better. And, it's like with anything. And that some of the things that the police could have done could have been better, but could have and should have never does, And I just think they've done a pretty decent job, all things considered, to get, the evidence that they've been able to put together. It's a pretty strong case. And, obviously, they've got to prove it, and what I've seen thus far, I think the evidence is still pretty compelling, Noah. But again, it's not up to us; it's up to the jury. I mean, they're the ones that are going to be the ultimate judges, as Judge Danielle Washburn, who's presiding over the matter, which we forgot to mention at the top. So, but he's been doing a tremendous job, and
Yeah.
so yeah, he spoke last week about saying that the reason why we stand up for the jury is because they're ultimately the judges, and they deserve that respect, because they're the ones that are going to decide the fate of Terrance Santistevan. No, I'm going to spring this one on you. I know it was early this morning, but Austin Black, this lady, testified this morning. She flew from Alaska. She actually caught a ferry from where she lived in Alaska, and then caught a plane from Seattle to Phoenix, and spoke about her time in Texas. I think she was staying with some family members, and Julie Santistevan happened to be there, and she never. My understanding is she didn't have a beef with Julie Santistevan, but when she overheard some conversations about getting rid of bullets or projectiles. Noah, you remember that?
Yep. Yep. Oh, yeah, we didn't mention her. Agreed with on direct examination. I think she said that she overheard Julie and Santistevan talking about trying to get rid of a gun. But then on cross examination, I think Lynch called her on that and said that wasn't actually ammunition that they were talking about, referring to a previous interview that they had done. And then I think she corrected herself by saying that it was actually ammunition that she had overheard them getting rid of. But in either case, it was 9mm ammunition that she had overheard them talking about trying to get rid of.
And Austin, she was actually pregnant, wasn't she? Austin Black. She was pregnant at the time, and she was. I think one of the motivations for giving evidence today was that she said at the time she was terrified for the well-being of her family, and it really sort of got her back up against Julie Santistevan.
Yeah. I think, like you said, that she was honest. Like you don't like Julie Santistevan much, do you? I think she kind of pushed back on that by saying, prior to this, she didn't have a problem, but because of this, because he was thrust into this position, and she felt that she was endangered, and so because of that was the problem that she had. So there was no problem prior to this happening, but it was because she felt she'd been put in danger of pregnancy, and so that was why she was sort of angry about that.
Yeah, the mama bear mode was kicking in, wasn't it, Noah?
Yeah.
I think she said, I never had an issue with her until this, and when she says this, it was, she was in Pflugerville in Austin, which is a suburb of Austin, and that's where she was, and she never had a problem with Julie, but she said that, and it was an interesting testimony, and it really sort of it highlights the tensions, doesn't it? A lot like it's like with Santistevan's Julie Santistevan's friend, the one who worked with her that was going to sell her some money off the top.
Yeah, Savannah Schuster, I believe.
Savannah Schuster, thank you, Noah. Yeah, so it was sort of a bit like that, wasn't it? A sense of, I didn't get the sense of betrayal from Austin Black, but with Savannah there was a sense of betrayal that she was being used basically as for somewhere for Santistevan to hide or sort of get away from sort of wherever she was living in Mesa.
Yeah, I remember there being a tough moment where Schuster was testifying, and it was hard for her to say that, because I think it was her who told the police where exactly, like the address of where exactly they were in Texas, and so because of where they were able to find that, and so she was caught in the middle there between helping out a friend or helping out law enforcement.
And to quote Austin Black, she said something along the lines of, that after she was pregnant, she felt that Julie had put her family in danger. That's what Austin Black sort of said today. She wasn't happy at all about what was going on in the house in Pflugerville. So she didn't hold back on that, Noah.
Yeah, I guess both of them had their reasons for testifying.
Austin, why was Terrance and Julie not living with you for very much longer?
He had gotten taken by the police.
Terrance was arrested?
Yes.
This conversation that you overheard obviously took place before he was arrested?
Correct.
Do you remember exactly how much time went by from this conversation until he was arrested?
I do not.
You remember telling the investigators you thought it was the day before?
It had to have been close to the call, yes.
Now, at this point, you don't remember exactly?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly.
Do you remember you had the interview in Texas, right, where you were staying in a motel?
Correct.
And then after the detectives from Casa Grande Police Department went back to Arizona, did you have a phone interview with Sergeant Martinez later?
Yes.
And do you remember if it was during that phone interview with Sergeant Martinez that you discussed this conversation that you overheard?
I do remember telling my mom that I remember them talking about this and that we needed to call him.
Now, Ms. Ellsbury asked you that why you weren't very happy with Julie. Did you have any issues with Julie before Terrance and she arrived at your mom and your stepfather's house in Texas?
No,
Did you have issues with Julie after that happened?
I did have issues with her after he had gotten arrested
Why?
because she put my family in danger and I was pregnant and I knew she knew, so I didn't want her around me or my family.
Okay, so just before we wind this up, just again, what are your overall thoughts again of this week's evidence? I mean, they interviewed so many Casa Grande police officers this week, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean, so many this week and just so many, like, I feel like we're going to get the whole department. But
Just
yeah,
about, yeah,
maybe I'll
I'm waiting for Chief McCroy to step up and give
yeah.
some evidence. I mean, they've called just about everybody in. So, and again, I don't see any. Again, like I said last week, if you smell it something if it's bad, and I just can't. I've tried to be objective here, and I just can't see anything at all that suggests to me that they've done anything improper. I mean, yes, some things could have been better and that, but I still think that given the circumstances and that, I think they've done a pretty decent job, actually. To be honest with you, that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it goes back to the same sort of line of questioning that's kind of gone from Lynch to every single law enforcement member with varying degrees of involvement, very minor to sort of major involvement to day one all the way through the case. And so I completely expect Lynch to continue that line of questioning.
Yep.
I'm sure we're going to see more members from the department. And so Lynch is going to continue doing what he's been doing and keep pushing on.
Yep. And in terms of people attending, on the Santistevan family side, they're still there. They turn up every day. And I think Burgundy has been there a couple of times. I've seen her sitting in the gallery. But on
Yeah.
the prosecution side, there's the Murrietas. They've just been tremendous. They've got, Janie's got a number of sisters, and I know one's going back to Arkansas, and we wish her a safe trip back home. But it was really nice to meet her, and it's just been great to meet Janie's sisters. They've been a pillar of strength to Janie, and also Claudia Sanchez with young Brianna. They're sitting at the front as well too, and they've sat through some pretty dry testimonies, and they're there every day, and it just goes to show you that they really want justice for these girls, and they've been quite remarkable. And I know Janie's husband Keno's sister Carly's in the audience as well too, and she's in the gallery, I should say, and she's another pillar of strength, and she's been providing tremendous support to all of the Murrietas. And Tatiana Murrieta, she's the vice mayor of Coolidge City Council. She's there as well too, and they're providing support. Young Macy, Danny's sister's been in the gallery as well too. So the Murrietas have got a lot of support. I can tell. I told Janie this afternoon. A lot of people have been asking me, Noah, about how it's going and how Janie's holding up. So there's a lot of people. If you're watching this, Janie, or some family member from the Murrietas, I can tell you that a lot of people are watching or asking me how you're going, and they're passing on their best wishes to you. There's a lot of people in Casa Grande that their hearts are with you and the families. So I just wanted to pass that on. So, yeah. So anyway, Noah, I think we better wrap it up for this week. So where can people find your articles, Noah?
Yeah, and all Central, the 2 articles a week. I'm on the podcast at the end of the week.
Absolutely. And as we say, if you think we've said something wrong, or you feel like you'd like to put your version of events across, certainly we'd be interested in doing that after the trial. But at the moment, we're just sort of trying to report on what's been sort of going on and sort of summarising what will be occurring this week. And this week, Noah, Country Thunder, we've both been excused from going to Country Thunder. I'm a little bit disappointed because I would have liked to have seen Keith Urban, because I interviewed Keith way back in 1992 when he was a nobody, and I'm still a nobody, but Keith's a superstar. So it'd be great to chew the fat with Keith, a fellow Aussie at Country Thunder. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be there. But the traffic's going to be a nightmare, Noah.
Yeah. Curious to see what it's going to be like, but no, I'm looking forward to it.
I've got a solution. Why don't they get a police officer at the left-hand turn? People that go to Pinal County Superior Court know this. When you're trying to do a left-hand turn to get out of the court building, it's just a nightmare. And this week's going to be an absolute nightmare. So whoever's listening who's got some power, get a patrol officer between 5 and 5:30, and maybe you can sort of redirect the traffic. Hey, that's an idea.
Yeah. Just do it for me, just so I can get out.
That's it. Anyway, no, look, it's been tremendous talking to you about the trial of Terrance Santistevan. And folks, if you want to see the podcast or any of our other social media platforms, don't forget to log on to panelcentral.com. We've got a YouTube platform, an X platform, a Facebook platform. We've got everything just about. Our Instagram platform as well too. So yeah, check us out. And if you want to know what's going on in Pinal County, we're the place to come to. We cover everything from Florence to Coolidge to Arizona City, Noah, and Casa Grande, and David Church does Eloy. Everyone does a great job at our paper, and we're so proud of our platform and proud to tell the story of Pinal County. And again, with this trial, it's one of the biggest crime trials that's occurred in Pinal County for quite some time, and it's affected a lot of people. And we feel it's really important to get the story out, and we're trying our best to do so. And we're trying to follow the appropriate guidelines and to get it out to you. So on that note, thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to join into our podcast next week. So thanks for watching.